Think you know everything about J.J. Da Boss from Street Outlaws? From his mysterious 8-year prison sentence that he refuses to fully explain, to the time he and his wife literally crashed into each other during filming, to the shocking lawsuit accusing him of attempted murder, this Memphis racing legend has more secrets than horsepower under his hood. Here are 15 things you never knew about J.J. Da Boss from Street Outlaws. Fact 1. When J.J. Da Boss rolls up to the starting line in his massive 4,720-pound 1949 Chevy pickup truck called Ole Heavy, he's not just driving any ordinary race car. This weathered beast of a machine has been in the Day family for an incredible 6 generations, making it one of the most historically significant vehicles ever featured on Street Outlaws. The truck's story begins decades before J.J. was even born, when it first rolled off the assembly line as a working man's vehicle. For generations, members of the Day family used Ole Heavy as their daily work truck, hauling materials and earning their living in the construction and roofing business that has defined the family for decades. The truck saw countless hours of hard labor, from construction sites to roofing jobs, building up the kind of character and durability that only comes from real-world use. What makes this even more remarkable is that JJ has kept the same original seat that was in the truck when he first bought it over 20 years ago. Despite multiple crashes, rebuilds, and modifications, he's maintained that connection to the vehicle's working-class roots. The truck has survived everything from highway accidents to being rebuilt with new chassis components. Yet it continues to carry the Day family legacy down the quarter mile. Unlike many street racers who build cars specifically for racing, JJ chose to transform his family's actual work truck into a racing machine. This decision reflects his deep respect for his family's blue-collar heritage and his belief that the truck's history gives it something that purpose-built race cars simply can't replicate. The fact that 6 generations of his family have depended on this vehicle for their livelihood adds an emotional weight to every race that goes far beyond simple competition. Today, Ole Heavy represents more than just horsepower and speed. It's a rolling piece of family history that connects JJ to his ancestors while carrying their working-class values into the high-stakes world of televised street racing, making every victory feel like a tribute to generations of Day family tradition. Fact 2. He spent 8 years in federal prison. One of the most mysterious aspects of J.J. Da Boss's past is his 8-year and 1-month stint in federal prison, a period of his life that he has deliberately kept shrouded in secrecy despite his fame on Street Outlaws. While JJ has openly acknowledged serving this significant amount of time behind bars, he has never publicly revealed the specific charges that led to his conviction or provided detailed explanations about what exactly happened during those years. This lengthy federal sentence suggests that whatever JJ was involved in was serious enough to warrant substantial prison time under the federal court system, which typically handles crimes that cross state lines or involve federal agencies. The fact that it was a federal conviction rather than a state-level offense indicates the charges were likely more complex than simple street racing violations or minor infractions. What makes this even more intriguing is that despite multiple interviews, television appearances, and social media presence, JJ has managed to keep the details of his conviction completely out of the public eye. No court records, mugshots, or official documents related to his case have surfaced online, which is unusual for someone with such a high public profile. Even Discovery Channel, which has hinted at revealing more about JJ's past on future episodes of Street Outlaws, has yet to provide any concrete information about the nature of his federal charges. JJ himself has stated that his time in prison made him wiser about life in general and more determined to run a lawful business after his release. He credits the experience with mellowing his criminal tendencies and putting him on a better path. but he consistently refuses to elaborate on what led to his incarceration in the first place. The only clue JJ has provided is his admission that his desire to provide everything for his family led him down the wrong path, suggesting that his criminal activities may have been financially motivated. However, this vague explanation leaves fans and critics alike wondering what exactly happened during those missing 8 years and 1 month of his life. Fact 3. He roofed houses for 20 years. Long before J.J. Dabos became a household name on Street Outlaws, he spent 2 full decades working as a roofer, following in the footsteps of his family, who had been in the construction business for generations. This blue-collar background shaped not only his work ethic, but also his entire approach to street racing, as every dollar he earned from his physically demanding roofing job went straight into his true passion of fixing up old cars. JJ came from a family where roofing was the primary source of income, and he learned the trade from his parents, who were both construction workers. The work was hard, dangerous, and required long hours under the blazing sun, but it provided the steady income that JJ needed to fund his growing obsession with muscle cars and street racing. What makes this particularly interesting is that JJ wasn't just dabbling in roofing as a side job. He made it his full-time career for 20 years, showing a level of dedication and commitment that carried over into his racing pursuits. The connection between his roofing work and his racing passion created a unique cycle in JJ's life. He would spend his days climbing roofs, installing shingles, and handling construction materials, then come home and immediately pour every penny he had earned into buying, trading, and fixing up old cars. This meant that JJ was essentially living paycheck to paycheck, not because he couldn't manage money, but because he was so driven to improve his racing vehicles that he would sacrifice personal comfort for automotive performance. Many of his family members also worked as roofers, creating a tight-knit community of blue-collar workers who understood the value of hard work and the importance of pursuing your dreams on your own time. This roofing background also explains JJ's hands-on approach to car building and his ability to work with his hands, skills that transferred directly from construction work to automotive mechanics. His willingness to spend every dollar on cars rather than on himself demonstrates the level of sacrifice and dedication that eventually led to his success in the street racing world. Fact 4. He has 11 children and 5 grandchildren. At just 51 years old, J.J. Dabos has managed to build what can only be described as a massive family tree. With 11 children and 5 grandchildren spread across multiple relationships throughout his life. This surprisingly large family structure reveals a side of the Street Outlaws star that goes far beyond his racing persona, showing how he has maintained connections and responsibilities across decades of complex personal relationships. The breakdown of JJ's family is particularly interesting because only 4 of his 11 children are with his current wife Trisha, who goes by the nickname Midget on the show. This means that 7 of his children came from previous relationships before he met Trisha in 2008, when JJ was already 30 years old and had established a significant portion of his family. The identities of the other mothers have been kept private, which is unusual for someone with such a public profile. But JJ has been deliberate about protecting the privacy of his children and their mothers. Some of JJ's children have become familiar faces to Street Outlaws fans, particularly his son Josh Day, who is known on the show as Doughboy and drives a 1962 Impala called Debo. Doughboy has followed in his father's footsteps by becoming a racer himself and is already married with children of his own, contributing to JJ's growing number of grandchildren. Another daughter, Whitney, has also appeared on the show, though most of JJ's children prefer to stay out of the spotlight. What makes JJ's family situation even more remarkable is that he became a grandfather while still in his early 40s, which is relatively young for that role. His grandchildren include Camden and Novalee, who are Doughboy's children with his wife Chelsea, and the fact that JJ has 5 grandchildren at his current age suggests that several of his older children started families of their own quite young. Despite the complexity of having children from multiple relationships, JJ appears to maintain close relationships with all of his kids and frequently posts about them on social media, often emphasizing how much joy and love they bring to his life. Fact 5. He created his own racing technique. JJ Da Boss developed a controversial but highly effective racing technique that essentially amounts to controlled cheating, and it became so closely associated with him that it earned him his famous catchphrase, "Off Witcha Head." This technique involves leaving on the count of 2, instead of waiting for the full countdown to 3, giving him a crucial split-second advantage that often determined the outcome of races before his opponents. Back in the early days of street racing, races were started by someone counting 1, 2, 3, and then dropping their hands or a flashlight to signal the start. This system relied on both racers listening carefully and launching their cars at exactly the same moment when the starter reached 3. However, JJ figured out that he could gain a significant advantage by anticipating the count and launching his car on 2 instead of waiting for 3, essentially getting a head start while staying technically within the gray area of the rules. This technique required incredible timing and nerves because if JJ left too early or if the starter noticed what he was doing, he could be disqualified or face serious consequences from angry competitors. The skill involved in consistently hitting the arm drop or flashlight signal perfectly while leaving early became one of JJ's signature moves, and other racers began to both fear and respect his ability to execute this risky strategy without getting caught. The phrase, "Off Witcha Head," became JJ's victory celebration and a warning to future opponents about what would happen if they raced against him. This catchphrase spread throughout the Memphis racing scene and eventually became so associated with JJ that fans and fellow racers would chant it whenever he won a race. The technique also demonstrated JJ's philosophy that street racing wasn't just about having the fastest car, but about being smart, slick, and willing to push the boundaries of what was considered fair play. Even today, JJ is still known for his ability to hit the arm drop or flashlight dead on, and Memphis Street Outlaws racers continue to use his famous phrase as their battle cry when celebrating victories. Fact 6. He founded Memphis's underground racing scene. Years before Street Outlaws ever existed, or JJ Da Boss became a television personality, he was already building his reputation as the founding father of Memphis's underground racing culture by creating and organizing a street racing scene that he named Spin City. This wasn't just a casual group of friends who occasionally raced on weekends, but a structured and organized racing community that JJ built from the ground up to become the foundation of what Memphis street racing would eventually become. The creation of Spin City demonstrated JJ's natural leadership abilities and his vision for what street racing could be when properly organized and managed. He understood that for underground racing to thrive, it needed more than just fast cars and empty streets. It required a sense of community, established rules, and someone who could bring together racers from all over the Memphis area. JJ took on this role and became the central figure that other racers looked to for guidance, organization, and legitimacy within the underground racing world. What made Spin City particularly significant was that JJ had raced on practically every street in Memphis by the time he decided to formalize the scene, giving him an unmatched knowledge of the local racing landscape and the respect of established racers throughout the area. His reputation as both a skilled driver and a fair organizer meant that when he announced races or established rules for Spin City events, other racers trusted his judgment and followed his lead. The name Spin City itself reflects the high-speed, high-stakes nature of the racing that JJ was organizing, where cars would frequently lose traction and spin out during intense races. JJ's ability to create this organized racing scene from scratch established him as much more than just another fast driver. It made him the godfather of Memphis racing culture and set the stage for everything that would follow. This foundation that JJ built with Spin City directly led to his eventual selection for Street Outlaws. As television producers recognized that he wasn't just a talented individual racer, but someone who had already proven his ability to organize and lead an entire racing community. Fact 7. He's been in multiple violent car accidents. JJ DaBoss has survived not just one, but multiple serious car accidents that could have easily ended his racing career or even his life, with the most dramatic incidents occurring in 2017 and 2022. These weren't minor fender benders or typical racing mishaps, but violent crashes that required hospitalization and left lasting impacts on both JJ and his racing operation. The first major accident happened in 2017, while JJ was driving his GMC Sierra pickup truck and hauling both Ole Heavy and his Chevy 2, called Heifer, on a trailer after a late night of racing in Arkansas. Exhausted from the long night, JJ briefly fell asleep behind the wheel and struck a concrete culvert near Newport, Arkansas, at an estimated 55 miles per hour. The impact was so severe that it caused Ole Heavy to break free from its tie-down straps and slam into the rear of Heifer, essentially destroying both race cars in addition to damaging his truck. JJ suffered a broken right hand, broken ribs, and various cuts and bruises in this accident, but he considered himself lucky because the crash could have been much worse. In typical JJ fashion, he joked that it was fortunate the accident broke his right arm since he's left-handed, and he immediately began making plans to rebuild both damaged vehicles, even while still recovering from his injuries. The second major accident occurred in January of 2022, while JJ and his wife Tricia were filming Street Outlaws America's List in La Villa, Texas. In a bizarre and terrifying turn of events, JJ and Tricia were racing against each other in separate cars when JJ's car caught fire due to a blown oil line or blow-off tube, causing him to lose control and crash directly into Tricia's car at high speed. JJ's car burst into flames, and he suffered burns to his face and hands from the fire that entered the cockpit, while Tricia sustained serious hip injuries that required surgery and hospitalization. Both accidents demonstrate the inherent dangers of the racing lifestyle that JJ has chosen, where mechanical failures and human error can instantly transform a normal race into a life-threatening situation. Fact 8. He's facing a $5 million lawsuit. In 2018, JJ DaBoss found himself at the center of a massive federal lawsuit when street racer Chad Larkin and his wife Jenny filed a $5 million civil complaint against him, Discovery Channel, and the show's production company. The lawsuit alleged that JJ had violently assaulted Chad during filming for Street Outlaws Memphis, with Chad claiming that JJ screamed the words, "F you, fat boy, get your own show," before launching into a brutal physical attack that left him fearing for his life. According to the federal court documents filed in Memphis, the incident began when JJ invited Chad to participate in a race that would be filmed for the show, with a $1,000 buy-in and the promise that the winner would take home the pot. However, Chad alleged that the entire setup was designed to create fake drama and controversy, with producers encouraging trash talking and instructing Chad to bring along a friend dressed in prison attire to heighten tensions between the racing crews. The lawsuit claimed that JJ and several members of his racing family kicked and beat Chad about his head and body after the verbal confrontation escalated, with Chad suffering extensive injuries, including a chipped front tooth, black eye, herniated disc, torn left meniscus, and various cuts and bruises. Chad's wife Jenny was also allegedly injured when she tried to help her husband, with a female member of JJ's crew grabbing her by the hair and pulling her to the ground, causing damage to her head, neck, back, and arm. Perhaps most disturbing were the allegations about the production crew's behavior during the assault. The lawsuit claimed that producers made no effort to stop the violence and instead instructed camera operators to get closer and capture better shots of Chad's bloodied face, with one producer allegedly telling emergency medical technicians to get off his set when they tried to help the injured racer. The case was eventually settled out of court through arbitration in 2019, with both parties agreeing to drop their claims and pay their own legal fees, though the specific terms of the settlement were never disclosed to the public. Fact 9. He strategically uses female drivers. J.J. Dabos developed one of the most clever and psychologically manipulative strategies in street racing history, when he realized that his reputation had become so intimidating that other racers were refusing to compete against him directly. Rather than accept fewer racing opportunities, JJ came up with a brilliant solution that involved teaching his wife Trisha, nicknamed Midget, and his close friend Precious Cooper all of his racing secrets and tricks, then using them as his secret weapons to exploit male competitors' assumptions about female drivers. The strategy worked because JJ understood that many male street racers would automatically underestimate women behind the wheel, assuming they couldn't possibly be as skilled or aggressive as their male counterparts. Exhausted from the long night, JJ briefly fell asleep behind the wheel and struck a concrete culvert near Newport, Arkansas, at an estimated 55 miles per hour. The impact was so severe that it caused Ole Heavy to break free from its tie-down straps and slam into the rear of Heifer, essentially destroying both race cars in addition to damaging his truck. JJ suffered a broken right hand, broken ribs, and various cuts and bruises in this accident, but he considered himself lucky because the crash could have been much worse. In typical JJ fashion, he joked that it was fortunate the accident broke his right arm since he's left-handed, and he immediately began making plans to rebuild both damaged vehicles, even while still recovering from his injuries. The second major accident occurred in January of 2022, while JJ and his wife Trisha were filming Street Outlaws America's List in La Villa, Texas. In a bizarre and terrifying turn of events, JJ and Trisha were racing against each other in separate cars when JJ's car caught fire due to a blown oil line or blow-off tube, causing him to lose control and crash directly into Trisha's car at high speed. JJ's car burst into flames, and he suffered burns to his face and hands from the fire that entered the cockpit, while Trisha sustained serious hip injuries that required surgery and hospitalization. Both accidents demonstrate the inherent dangers of the racing lifestyle that JJ has chosen, where mechanical failures and human error can instantly transform a normal race into a life-threatening situation. Fact 8. He's facing a $5 million lawsuit. In 2018, JJ Dabos found himself at the center of a massive federal lawsuit when street racer Chad Larkin and his wife Jenny filed a $5 million civil complaint against him, Discovery Channel, and the show's production company. The lawsuit alleged that JJ had violently assaulted Chad during filming for Street Outlaws Memphis, with Chad claiming that JJ screamed the words, "F you, fat boy, get your own show," before launching into a brutal physical attack that left him fearing for his life. According to the federal court documents filed in Memphis, the incident began when JJ invited Chad to participate in a race that would be filmed for the show, with a $1,000 buy-in and the promise that the winner would take home the pot. However, Chad alleged that the entire setup was designed to create fake drama and controversy, with producers encouraging trash talking and instructing Chad to bring along a friend dressed in prison attire to heighten tensions between the racing crews. The lawsuit claimed that JJ and several members of his racing family kicked and beat Chad about his head and body after the verbal confrontation escalated, with Chad suffering extensive injuries, including a chipped front tooth, black eye, herniated disc, torn left meniscus, and various cuts and bruises. Chad's wife Jenny was also allegedly injured when she tried to help her husband, with a female member of JJ's crew grabbing her by the hair and pulling her to the ground, causing damage to her head, neck, back, and arm. Perhaps most disturbing were the allegations about the production crew's behavior during the assault. The lawsuit claimed that producers made no effort to stop the violence and instead instructed camera operators to get closer and capture better shots of Chad's bloodied face, with one producer allegedly telling emergency medical technicians to get off his set when they tried to help the injured racer. The case was eventually settled out of court through arbitration in 2019, with both parties agreeing to drop their claims and pay their own legal fees, though the specific terms of the settlement were never disclosed to the public. Fact 9. He strategically uses female drivers. JJ Dabos developed one of the most clever and psychologically manipulative strategies in street racing history, when he realized that his reputation had become so intimidating that other racers were refusing to compete against him directly. Rather than accept fewer racing opportunities, JJ came up with a brilliant solution that involved teaching his wife Trisha, nicknamed Midget, and his close friend Precious Cooper all of his racing secrets and tricks, then using them as his secret weapons to exploit male competitors' assumptions about female drivers. The strategy worked because JJ understood that many male street racers would automatically underestimate women behind the wheel, assuming they couldn't possibly be as skilled or aggressive as their male counterparts. These early racing experiences on dirt roads and off-road terrain taught JJ fundamental lessons about car control, weight transfer, and reading track conditions that would prove invaluable when he eventually moved to paved surfaces and more powerful vehicles. Starting so young also meant that JJ developed his racing instincts and reflexes during the critical years when his brain was still forming neural pathways, essentially hardwiring his responses to high-speed situations in ways that drivers who started later in life could never replicate. The muscle memory and split-second decision-making abilities that he built during those childhood years became the foundation for his later success as an adult racer, giving him advantages that went far beyond simple experience or knowledge. This early involvement in racing also explains JJ's deep understanding of the psychological aspects of competition, as he learned from childhood how to read opponents, identify weaknesses, and exploit opportunities that less experienced drivers might miss. By the time he reached adulthood and began competing in serious street racing events, JJ had already spent more time behind the wheel in competitive situations than many professional drivers accumulate in their entire careers, making his eventual dominance in the Memphis racing scene almost inevitable, given his extraordinary head start in developing the skills that matter most in high-stakes racing. Fact 12. His mother is Pentecostal. Despite JJ Dabos's reputation as a street racing outlaw who spent years in federal prison and built his career around illegal underground racing, he was actually raised in a strict Pentecostal household by a deeply religious mother who instilled strong Christian values in him from an early age. This religious upbringing creates a fascinating contrast with his later life choices and demonstrates the complex relationship between his family's faith and his involvement in the often dangerous and legally questionable world of street racing. The Pentecostal faith is known for its emphasis on personal spiritual experiences, strict moral codes, and often conservative lifestyle choices that typically discourage involvement in activities like gambling, illegal racing, and the kind of risky behavior that defines street racing culture. However, JJ's mother somehow managed to balance her religious convictions with her support for her family's racing tradition, as she was the one who would carry young JJ on her hip to watch his father and uncle compete in street races throughout his childhood. This unique situation meant that JJ grew up experiencing both the spiritual discipline of Pentecostal worship and the adrenaline-fueled excitement of underground racing, creating a complex foundation that would shape his character throughout his life. His mother's willingness to expose him to racing despite her religious beliefs suggests that she understood racing was deeply embedded in the Day family culture and chose to support her husband and family even when it might have conflicted with certain aspects of her faith. The influence of his Pentecostal upbringing can still be seen in some of JJ's values and behaviors today, particularly in his emphasis on family loyalty, his sense of personal responsibility, and his belief in redemption and second chances. Even after his time in prison and his continued involvement in street racing, JJ has spoken about the importance of prayer and faith in his life, suggesting that his mother's religious teachings left a lasting impact despite his choice to pursue a lifestyle that many would consider incompatible with strict Christian values. This religious background also helps explain some of JJ's more principled approaches to racing and his emphasis on honor and fairness within the street racing community. Fact 13. He's an only child. One of the most surprising aspects of JJ Dabos's background is that despite being surrounded by his massive racing family and having 11 children of his own, he actually grew up as an only child in the small rural town of Joyner, Arkansas. This contrast between his childhood as a solitary kid and his later life, surrounded by dozens of racing crew members, children, and extended family, creates an interesting psychological profile that helps explain his strong drive to create the large, tight-knit community that defines the Memphis Street Outlaws. Growing up as an only child in Joyner, which has a population of only around 700 people, meant that JJ experienced a level of isolation and self-reliance that most people never encounter. Without brothers or sisters to compete with or rely on, he had to develop his own sense of identity and find his own sources of entertainment and companionship, which likely contributed to his early attraction to the excitement and community aspects of street racing, where he could connect with other people who shared his interests. The fact that JJ was raised as an only child also helps explain his natural leadership abilities and his comfort with being the central figure around whom others organize their activities. Only children often develop strong independence and decision-making skills because they don't have siblings to share responsibilities with or to challenge their choices, and these traits clearly served JJ well when he eventually became the leader of the Memphis racing scene and later the star of his own television show. This solitary childhood experience may also explain why JJ places such enormous value on the concept of racing family and why he works so hard to maintain close relationships with his crew members, his actual children, and the broader community of racers who look to him for guidance. Having grown up without the built-in family connections that most people take for granted, JJ seems to have consciously created the large, supportive network of relationships that he missed during his childhood, using street racing as the foundation for building the family connections he never had as a kid. Fact 14. He survived being set on fire. During the terrifying crash with his wife Tricia in January of 2022 while filming Street Outlaws America's List, JJ Dabos experienced what can only be described as a nightmare scenario when his race car suddenly burst into flames with him trapped inside the cockpit. According to JJ's own account of the incident, a blow-off tube or oil line came loose during the race, which caused fuel or oil to ignite and send flames directly into the driver's compartment, where he was strapped in and unable to escape immediately. The fire created an incredibly dangerous situation because JJ was moving at high speed when the flames erupted, meaning he had to maintain control of a burning vehicle while simultaneously dealing with the physical pain and panic of being on fire. The flames that entered the cockpit burned his face and hands, causing injuries that required immediate medical attention and left visible marks that took weeks to heal properly. What makes this incident even more harrowing is that the fire occurred at the exact moment when JJ's car was colliding with his wife Tricia's vehicle, creating a situation where both husband and wife were in serious danger simultaneously. JJ had to deal with being on fire while also knowing that his out-of-control burning car was about to crash into his wife's race car, adding psychological trauma to the physical pain he was experiencing from the burns. Despite the severity of the burns to his face and hands, JJ demonstrated his typical resilience and determination by refusing to let the injuries slow him down for very long. Within days of the accident, he was already back in his shop, working on rebuilding his damaged race car and making plans for future races, showing the kind of mental toughness that has defined his entire racing career. The fact that JJ survived this fire without more serious injuries speaks to both his experience as a driver and the safety equipment installed in his race car, but it also serves as a stark reminder of just how dangerous street racing can be when mechanical failures occur at high speeds. Fact 15. His daughter recently crashed at high speed. In May of 2025, JJ DeBoss experienced every racing parent's worst nightmare when his daughter, known as Wee Wee, was involved in a horrific high-speed crash at the Bonne Terre drag strip in St. Francois County, Missouri, during an outlaw drag racing event. The accident was so violent that it completely flipped her car and left spectators fearing for her life, creating a wake-up call that forced JJ to seriously reconsider whether he wants his children participating in the dangerous style of racing that has defined his own career. The crash occurred during what's known as an outlaw drag race, which involves high-horsepower cars racing on unprepared surfaces with minimal safety protocols and races started by arm drop rather than the more controlled electronic systems used at professional tracks. Wee Wee's car veered to the right during the race and struck the retaining wall at high speed, causing the vehicle to flip violently before coming to rest as a mangled wreck that bore little resemblance to the race car it had been moments before. Fortunately, Wee Wee walked away from the crash with only bruising, thanks to what appears to have been a properly installed roll cage, safety seat, helmet, and protective collar that absorbed the impact and prevented more serious injuries. However, the visual impact of seeing his daughter's car destroyed in such a dramatic fashion clearly shook JJ, who has survived multiple serious accidents himself, but had never before watched one of his own children experience that level of danger. The incident led JJ to make a rare public statement, questioning the wisdom of allowing his children to participate in outlaw racing, saying, "I don't think I want my kids to race. Not this kind of racing outlaw that we do." This represents a significant shift in perspective for someone who has spent his entire life promoting and participating in exactly this type of dangerous, unregulated racing. JJ also gave credit to Brian Britt, who was racing against Wee Wee at the time, for his quick thinking and skilled driving that helped prevent the crash from being even worse by recognizing that his competitor was in trouble and taking evasive action.